Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is, in fact, the Talamanca Review. And it's Friday, the 26th of December, and it's 9:57 p.m. I woke up late this morning, 10:30. If my wife's not around to wake me up, I'll sleep in quite a bit. It's kind of weird, or not weird, but those last 3 hours I sleep from like 7:30 to 10:30, there's all this very lucid dreaming. And I remember it all, very powerful dreams. And it's not always the case, but um, it has been for the last few days. Never ceases to amaze what comes up in a dream, right? It's like meditation is similar. You just can't believe what pops into your head and why. That's the big question, is why. And that is sort of, I suppose, a question that maybe is better left unanswered. And just interpret what comes in and try to figure out what you're supposed to get out of it, and learn whatever it is, because there's no wasted energy in consciousness. What we as human beings waste a lot of energy operating through our egos. The ego is just a huge energy waste. It's amazing the amount of energy that goes into just maintaining the structure of person, the person of Bruce McDonald. If you were to look at the analogy of computation, it's 40-50% of the CPU's resources is maintaining the facade of the person. I'm not joking. It's a huge, huge energy waste, the person. But, they come in handy when you have to meet people at, church socials and things like this, like I'll be doing tomorrow night with my wife's church. Have another little puppy up here now, puppy pit bull, about 5 months. Some of you have seen him playing with my female. I can't really let him around the other male right now. He's very territorial and, quite frankly, extremely jealous. He does not like it when I show affection to anyone or anything else. He gets very upset with me, very possessive of me. I'm like his prison bitch or something. Sorry, but I can't think of a better analogy. When my wife and I hug, he'll come in between our thighs and wiggle himself to try to separate us. I kid you not. The emotional complexity of animals when they become habituated to human love and attention is unbelievable. And it is possible I've made some mistakes and spoiled my animals, but, I'm not a professional hunter, so they don't have to be trained and living in kennels and let out only when we're going on a hunt or something, or when they need more training. So this is my life with my animals. I want to talk about a few things tonight. And the first thing on my mind is an HBO miniseries that I watched. And so sometimes when I have some time, I'll just go to my AI and I'll say, what are the top rated HBO miniseries? And it'll give me a list. It'll crank them all out. And some of them I never heard of because, I'm not watching oh yeah, the new logo. You like the new logo? Yeah, me too. And so there's all this really good drama that I've missed. And I like to keep up with drama just because I'm a drama queen. I freely admit that. I write and Drama is an art form. It's the balancing of tensions, and the correct balancing of tensions captures or hypnotizes human attention. I suppose at this point I'd be a very efficient propagandist as well. Perhaps give Edward Bernays a run for his money. But alas, I attempt to use my higher abilities and my given talents for the greater good, for the greater humanity, for the greater purpose. And I'm very proud of that. One has to be able to live with themselves. And how we act and how we comport ourselves is part of the person that we have to live with. And I don't like doing anything that makes me feel bad. I have a very difficult time selling things to people. You know, I feel ashamed even mentioning my books, to be honest. And now at the same time, I want people to read them. I want people to share the energy and the vision I put into the books. But selling is something I can't do. And it is really the fulcrum of the capital system, sales. No sales, no capital system. So now there was an HBO series based on an Alan Moore comic called The Watchmen. And if you're not familiar with who Alan Moore is, it's Moore. He's a Scotsman, I believe, perhaps English, but I believe Scottish. And he became a relatively famous comic book writer in the late 20th century. And they retitled comic books to graphic novels. And at that time, if you read these things, you were considered simple, or maybe an early version of an incel, you know, a laughing stock. Serious people read Dostoevsky. They read Proust, Baudelaire, Hemingway, Pound, Eliot. Not comic books. But the truth is, as I've articulated in podcasts dedicated to this topic, comic books, in a kind of cosmic irony, were used to displace some of the most important communications to the human race in the later 20th century, which is why they're being reinforced so much now with cinema. Marvel Studios, Disney Studio, all of these things. All of the big movies in the last decade or two have been comic book movies. All of the blockbusters or something in the comic book world. And I would consider James Cameron's Avatar to be of that genre, the comic book world. You know, pure fancy. You know, what some people still consider to be childish. But there was so much information displaced into comic books. They were really the foreshadowing of the world that is coming to be now. This world was foreshadowed as early as 45 years ago, you know. So I grew up reading comic books, and I kept reading comic books up until my early 20s, up until I was about, 22 or about 22 years old. I was still going to the comic book shop and dropping 20, 30, 40 bucks back then, which was a lot of money. And I would go home and I would read comic books. And I found the stories fascinating, and I found some of the characters fascinating. Now, alongside all of this, I was reading poetry and novels, serious, what the adult world calls serious material in its chauvinism, because there was nothing super serious about it, nor is there anything that I would consider to be an adult world anymore. And so The Watchmen, you may have seen the movie. It was a very popular movie, very long. I think in its uncut version, it's over 3 hours. And it chronicles the exploits of a group of heroes called the Minutemen, who existed nowhere but the Watchmen comic book series. There was never any crossovers with any other heroes, like Spider-Man or Superman or the Marvel or the DC world. The Watchmen were in their own world. And Alan Moore crafted an incredibly political world. Well, it was very, he would have Richard Nixon appearing in his comic books and create fantasy scenarios where, the Vietnam War was won and Vietnam is amalgamated as a state in the United States of America. Things like this. Now, The Watchmen comes very highly rated. It's about 8.2 on IMDb, the International Movie Database. Um, you know, it's not flawless. I mean, the highest rate, the number one ranked movie on IMDb is The Shawshank Redemption, which I don't think is a stellar movie or a stellar story in any way, shape, or form. But IMDb is governed by user votes, so it's a mob rule. But generally, if something gets over, 7.5 out of 10, based on 5, 10, 15, 20, or 100,000 votes, it's generally worth taking a look at. So the AI gave me a list, and I watched a couple of the HBO miniseries. One was The Night Of, about a legal case. John Turturro is the central character. Great actor, great New York actor. And it was a fantastic legal drama. 8 parts. It's a miniseries, right? And this has emerged as my favorite form of drama now, is the miniseries. True Detective followed it. I mean, they've done 4 seasons, but every season they change the location and the characters. It's every season is like a miniseries unto itself. But they were never able to capture the energy and power of season 1 in 2014 with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. Brilliant. And I watched another miniseries with Kate Winslet, also a police drama in a small town in Pennsylvania. Fantastic. Brilliantly written, great characters, great acting. And then The Watchmen was there, and it was very highly rated as well, like an 8.4 out of 10. And so I downloaded it, and I tried to watch it 3 or 4 times, but I could never get through the first episode. It was really bad, in my opinion. Now that I finished it, I realized that they needed the first episode to set up the series. But Don Johnson, of all people, was in it, playing the police chief of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But it's a Tulsa we don't recognize. It takes place in the Watchmen universe, right? It's Tulsa, but it's not Tulsa. And the story pivots around a reformed white supremacist group with strong political connections called the 7th Cavalry. And the superheroes have been sort of chased out of existence on this timeline. The more powerful ones have, like Dr. Manhattan, have left the planet. He's living on one of the moons of Jupiter. Europa, I believe. Yeah, Europa. And as it went on, it got better and better. I finished it in about 4 days, which is about 100 minutes of TV watching a day, which is a lot, I know. But like I said, I like drama. I have a lot of time up here. And then something in the plot emerged that just gobsmacked me. So there was a character, and he's the most intelligent man on the planet, and he used to be a Minuteman. And he he developed a machine that could teleport things to different places. But it was beyond teleportation, it was interdimensional. And it was a perfect example of what I was trying to express in The Breach and The Breach Redo, where I said, more and more, I have this sneaking feeling that a lot of this paranormal activity is interdimensional, but it's a horseshoe, meaning it begins here on the physical plane, and through technology or magic or a combination of the two, the thing is put into another dimension and brought back into the physical dimension in a manner that makes it appear supernatural. And they expressed the idea perfectly in this HBO miniseries, The Watchmen. I couldn't believe it. I went, wow. And so remember, as we go through this material, always remember that many of the power-based consciousness practitioners on the planet require no faith in the divine because they know it exists, but they treat it like a truant officer and they are truant children from high school, meaning that they don't really have any desire for the love or the grace of God. In fact, in many ways, their plans are adjacent to God. And this is another example of the Luciferian consciousness. Okay? So as you begin to think through these paradigms, realize that they literalize themselves most often in the dramas and the machinations of humanity and in individual personalities, as opposed to being an existing figure per se. Now, like all things on higher dimensions, Lucifer is simultaneously literal and figurative. So the knowledge of God and the pursuit of goals and ideals that aggrandize an individual without deference to or gratitude toward the Creator for existence are manifestations of this Luciferian consciousness. And I'm well aware that at times I do sound like a fundamentalist Christian or even a Muslim in terms of my deference to the divine, my submission to the divine, which is simply expressed as a gratitude for life and the recognition that all things in the field of life are given the same opportunity by the same source of life as myself. And that if I love the source of life, then I must love these other things and try my best not to aggrandize myself to the point where I can consume vast resources on this planet for individual ambition that doesn't ultimately serve the human collective, but just myself and a small group of people, which is the very definition of the so-called secret societies that the podcasting world seems enamored with now. But when you understand the simple psychology of it, you realize that almost anything at this point can be a secret society. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily doping on adrenochrome or heavily invested in the child trafficking market or some of the more dubious and darker aspects of satanic subculture, which would be a subset of Luciferian culture, and in many ways even rebuked by Luciferian culture. Believe it or not, they don't work hand in hand. The Luciferian culture is more about ideas and ideals. I would say, and again, I don't, at the risk of being a one-trick pony, I would say that much of the Kabbalistic consciousness we see in the world now could be properly articulated as Luciferian, although practicing Kabbalists would probably be somewhat chafed by that characterization, though they would have little or no recourse in debate with me. But I'm sure they could sufficiently filibuster to bore any 10 neutral observers to the point where they would just concede the Kabbalist point for fear of having to listen to more of the Dershowitz style filibuster, which is a form of energy exhaustion, right? It's a sort of energy exhaustion. They do it all the time. Rabbi Shmuley's doing it now. He's popping up in my feed more and more, going after the people he's deemed to be anti-Semites, like Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and characterizing them as the archetype of evil, never realizing that it's more appropriately as a title affixed to him. But that's the blindness. So when you choose any consciousness path other than the divine, you develop blind spots. The divine path is slower in the cultivation of consciousness. There's no outrageous powers. You're not going to be psychic overnight, which is power based. People want psychic abilities for power, for self-aggrandizement. You can call it a subset of the mystical consciousness that can be affixed to the person. The divine cannot be affixed to the person. The person has to be put aside for the divine to come in. This is why the two systems are so antithetical, right? You see this emerge time and time again in the dueling debate between Christians and Satanists. I myself really don't take a side in that debate. I think people have the right to explore whatever they want to explore. But remember old Bruce's philosophy. You got into it, you get out of it. Okay, so if you went down that path and you end up in quicksand, metaphorically speaking, don't beg the government to form a committee to throw a vine to pull you out of the quicksand. How did you get there? And so through this reasoning, you can better understand my position on liberalism. Liberalism is a gradual and evolving decimation of the human capability to survive and adapt and grow to circumstance, which is part of the spiritual lesson of being alive. But when you have the great liberal mommy come in and kiss the boo-boo better and tell you, I know you're 9 years old, but those training wheels have to go back on your bike. But mom, my friends will laugh at me. Well, I don't care. Your safety is more important. Liberalism. So I was astounded to see this in The Watchmen, where they actually convey this idea of man-made paranormal phenomenon, albeit in the context of a comic book. But like I said, this is a lot of this stuff I'm describing to you, like these series, if you want to watch them, like The Night of and The Watchmen. I mean, The Watchmen is 21st century Shakespeare. I shit you not. No embellishment. Okay? It's 21st century Shakespeare. It's just astounding to watch these things. And so one of the reasons that a story like that would come up in the 8-part miniseries is that they have to disclose, right? So the Luciferian relationship with the divine is it's sort of like, yeah, I know you exist. Yeah, I know you gave me life, but I'm busy here. I'm doing what you don't seem to want to do, and I'm going to do it whether you like it or not, because I'm a super important person and more powerful than God. And that's the mindset in a nutshell. But being aware of God, they have to cover their tracks legally because there are laws. There are creational laws. Now, these laws haven't really been taught to the human race. I mean, the 10 Commandments are like, a drunken sailor's version of them. They're just the basest expression of morality because that's all we dumb animals can handle. But when you come to understand the true laws of creation, or the true laws of co-creation, because man is the mini God, right? So the true laws of co-creation are create as God creates. Don't produce anything that wastes energy or pivots itself off of bad circuitry that exhausts resources. Take into account all the other life forms you exist with before you undertake any enterprise. Any enterprise. So think about the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer, in context to creational law. It was most certainly a satanic act, and it was most certainly understood to be a satanic act by the people who did it. Whether they understand or believe in Satan or not, in some way, shape, or form, they knew it. And you can see the deep regret and the deep guilt in a lot of these people as they're interviewed later on in their lives. You know, the sort of plaque or catchphrase of the captured Luciferian. A captured Luciferian is someone whose Luciferian ambition is sort of seen by the human heart, the human collective, and recognized as the Luciferian expression. And if there's no recourse to arrest the person or chastise the person, there's just a quiet, consensual condemnation of the person, which is what happened to Oppenheimer and many of the people on the nuclear project. And their catchphrase or the insane utterance that will come to represent the unyielding cycle of their consciousness until they die is, yeah, but did you feel justified in developing this bomb, knowing that our military would drop it on Japanese civilians. Yeah, but. And that but will haunt you till the day you die. And even on the other side, that but will haunt you. You don't want buts in your life. And this to me seems to capture the time we're in better than anything else. We're in a giant Luciferian expression. Now remember, I've also said many times that the negative and the positive work together to fulfill the goal of the divine. And so in this instance, you might ask yourself, why would God allow us to go through such a period of darkness? Indifferent depopulation of humanity on a choreographed plan that goes back decades, if not centuries? Why would all this darkness be allowed to come into the world? Well, the simple answer is because it's required to chasten. It chastens the imbalances in the human population. It rebalances things. And so that's what it's doing now. So we're seeing the darkest expressions possible on the planet now because the truth is, most of us have become very dark. And like I said, when you engage with these Luciferian and satanic energies, even if they don't overwhelm you, even if you don't become possessed, so to speak, when you engage with these energies, you create blind spots. And the way that God uncovers the veil and pulls away the veil so that we see what we could not see before, what was blinded from us, is we get a manifestation of our true nature. And that's what's going on in the world now. It's a manifestation of the true nature of man, most specifically expressed by the Western world, which long ago broke its obligatory harmony contract with nature and all the living beings, plant and insect included, around it. It broke the contract of harmony. But behind it all is the divine impulse, which is embedded in all of us. And the divine impulse is to break the limitation of the human experience and to answer questions which otherwise could not be answered in a normal human experience that didn't break boundaries. Now, also in the past on the Talamanca Review, I've made sweeping observations of the general consciousness that has evolved in the East as a result of the religious and philosophical systems that they embedded into their consciousness and epigenetically brought forward. So this would be Confucius, Confucianism, Mencius, another great Chinese social political philosopher, Taoism, and most notably Buddhism, which is cyclic. And I characterize the West as a marauding troop of Mongols chasing across the plains of the world on war horses, intent on punishing everything in its way because it won't bow to their master, Jesus. Now, that paradigm, which I've expressed in previous podcasts, looked at again tonight through the lens of the dilemma we face, would certainly place the materialism of the Western world as the largest agitator of global harmony and the collective harmony of all life on this planet. And it's extended beyond the West now. I think that in many ways China has been conscripted to the modality of thinking in the WEF, which is a rebasing mindset. And that rebasing is depopulation is the primary tool. You know, chop off the head and do business with whatever remaining humans who are traumatized and left on the planet to rebuild. But the societal expression that they want to create in this rebuilding is profoundly disharmonious with the life force and the life expressions around it. And therefore, at some point, it's going to have to answer for what it's doing. And that's where we come in. We're the offering on the altar. And they're going to try and rebalance their transgressions with our blood. And believe it or not, there are mechanisms at play in the multidimensional reality we live in which that could conceivably work. Much of it hinges on the consciousness of the people intended to be sacrificed. Now, they don't want any of us to see this stuff. And this is why we live in the great age of distraction. And this is why there's so many great TV shows. This is why there's so much mind candy out there, whatever your thing is. Smoking weed all day, watching too much HBO like me, playing video games, not attending to your inner life with regular and structured meditation, contemplation, or prayer. There's just so much distraction. There's so much candy out there. So many things to be addicted now. Almost everything our society produces now is rooted in addiction, which is a needless, repetitious cycle, so that consciousness doesn't have to escape that small loop and engage the larger darkness of the time in which we live. So we're distracted so we don't see what's going on. And that is most certainly the trick of a magician. And make no mistake about it, we are run by sorcerers. Oh, extraterrestrials, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sure. Sure. The interdimensional entities or the extraterrestrial entities would give us the rope to hang ourselves, which is what the Kabbalah is, which is what black magic is. These things were all given to us. Do you really think some human being figured this stuff out? No. It's given. And the person it's given to may never even know that it was given to them. They don't have to know per se. You know? Just ask yourself, where does any idea you have come from? And therefore, if you're not practicing what the Taoists call internal hygiene, you can't keep the channels of your consciousness clean, and you can't vouch for anything that comes through your imagination. We're the portals. Don't worry about CERN. Don't worry about what the sorcerers are up to. Every single human being on this planet is essentially a portal, right? A machine in which consciousness can express itself, and it doesn't have to be the consciousness assigned to the body in the prenatal stage. So, I keep it a bit shorter tonight. I don't have much more to say. I don't mean to do a downer of a podcast, but these things were just on my mind. Christmas is not quite over. We got New Year's to go through, but it's pretty close to over. Looking forward to my son getting here on the 14th of January. Looking forward to 2026. A lot of people say it's going to be a very tough year. They said the same thing about 2025. I suppose it could have been, depending on where you are in the world, because this is all man-made now. It's not the vicissitudes of God or the lords of karma. It's that most of the stuff going on in the world now is man-made. Economic downturns, weather, it's man-made. We're not dealing with natural forces now. That's one of the big charades of our time, is that the forces we're dealing with are natural. They're not natural, they're man-made. So we're getting very close to this mirror world of the Kabbalists. And the mirror world has been created to capture souls. Because all this stuff down here runs off the energy of soul, the spark of God. And so if you can capture souls, think of it like a multidimensional game like oil. Look at all the warfare and invasions that have happened to capture oil producing regions of the world. Look at what's happening in Venezuela, right? That's all about energy. Now think about it spiritually and what the real energy is, which is the human soul, the soul. Now you understand the game. And maybe that's what I should title tonight's podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamaker Review.